Chapter 15. A Jolly Drum Maker. The two Indian riders disappeared over a rocky ridge as the Yumatans watched in silence. When the hoofbeats could be heard no longer, Po Da climbed down from the roof and turned to Mr. Hollister. "Thank you for bringing message," he said with a faint smile. "Sharp Wind and Running Flame, best riders of tribe. Tell police quick. Swift Eagle, come back." Then Po Da told his people to return to their work, and the meeting broke up. "Those horses are super," Pete said to Red Feather. "Can you ride like that?" The Indian boy said that all Yumatan children learn to ride as soon as they're old enough to sit on a pony. "We keep the children's ponies in a corral at the edge of the pueblo," his twin added. "Would you like to see them?" "May I ride one?" Ricky burst out eagerly. "If you know how." "I can ride a little." It was decided that Pete, Pam, and Holly would take turns also, and they set off with their Indian friends. What a strange-looking corral, Pete thought. Instead of a board fence, it was enclosed with cedar posts. "We keep our sheep in here, too," Red Feather said, opening a low gate. As his sister closed it behind them, the Hollisters saw that the corral contained several sheep and a number of pinto ponies. Two of the ponies came up to the Indians. "We call them Sun and Moon," Blue Feather explained, patting the ponies. "Sun has the brown spots and Moon the black ones." "Can we ride him bareback like those men did?" Pete queried. "Try it. We do," Red Feather answered. With a little struggling, Pete and Pam climbed the ponies' backs and trotted out of the corral into a fenced-in field. "This is dreamy," Pam giggled, "but a little slippery to stay on." After the children had made several circles, Ricky and Holly asked for turns. The older children hopped off. They boosted Ricky onto Sun and Holly onto Moon. "I'm an Indian!" Ricky shouted and gave a whoop. "Don't frighten the ponies," Blue Feather warned him. But Sun already had become nervous. He ran faster, with Ricky clinging to his mane. "Stop!" the frightened boy shouted. But Sun only raced faster. Suddenly, Blue Feather cried out a command in Tiwa. Sun stopped short, throwing Ricky right over his head. As Pam screamed, her young brother somersaulted and landed in a pinyon bush. But he jumped up unhurt, and the others cheered. "We better go back now," Pam said. The Hollisters found their parents and Sue standing near one of the oval outdoor ovens, eating fresh-baked wheat bread and rabbit stew out of aspenwood bowls. "It's 'licious," Sue said between bites. "You eat some, too," said a stout Indian woman who was tending the oven, smiling at the newcomers. Pam thought she looked very attractive in her green skirt, purple blanket, and white boots. "Thank you," they said, taking the hot food she offered. As they finished eating, the Hollisters heard a great shout at the entrance of the pueblo. Through the gate rode Swift Eagle in his truck, followed by Sharp Wind and Running Flame on their horses. The governor drove up to where the Hollisters were standing and hopped out. How Red Feather and Blue Feather hugged him. As the other Indians gathered and cheered, Swift Eagle said that the Yumatans were no longer blamed for the theft, and he thanked the Hollisters for their help. In a few minutes, his people went back to their various tasks. Even Blanca seemed to know everybody was happy. The dove, which had been fluttering about, landed on Pam's shoulder and kissed her. The Indians laughed. "Blanca like Anglo children," came a voice from nearby. The Hollisters turned to see a broad-faced Indian sitting on a blanket in front of his house. He held a half-finished drum between his legs. Others of all sizes lay around him. "That's Jemez, the drum maker," said Red Feather, leading the visitors over and introducing them to him. "He's the jolliest man in our pueblo and is full of jokes." "May we look at your things?" Pete asked him politely. Jemez nodded and said if they wanted to, they might beat upon them. "Are these the same kind of drums that Santa Claus brings at Christmas?" Ricky asked, turning a turquoise and white one over in his hands. Jemez shook his head no. "These ceremonial drum," he said. "Very strong aspen wood and rawhide. No break." "You mean you can jump on them?" Holly asked impishly. Jemez looked up and grinned. Bluefeather held one hand over her mouth to smother a giggle. "You can jump on Big Drum over there," the man said, pointing to a giant instrument nearly as tall as Holly. Pete and Pam boosted her to the top of it. "See, it'll hold me," Holly cried in delight as she jumped on the middle of it. Then suddenly she gasped. Crash! The little girl went right through the drum. Although the Hollisters had not noticed, several children had been watching Holly, and they all laughed. "It's one of Jemez's jokes," Bluefeather told Holly, who by this time had recovered from her surprise. "Many Anglo children like to stand on drums, so Jemez has a special one with a cardboard top, which they fall through." Mr. and Mrs. Hollister and Redfeather joined the amused onlookers in time to see Holly climb out of the drum. Jemez set about immediately putting a new paper top on it, so as to be ready for the next curious visitor. "I believe we should leave now," Mrs. Hollister said, but the children begged for more time to play around the pueblo. "Please," Ricky said, "we're having such a good time." When Sue saw that her mother was not inclined to give permission, she suddenly chirped, "Everybody who loves Mommy, put up his right hand." All within hearing laughed and shot his right hand into the air. Mrs. Hollister blushed with happy embarrassment. "You little monkey," she said, kissing her small daughter. "All right, you may all stay a little longer." "How about practicing some more with the bows and arrows?" Redfeather suggested. "I'd like that," Ricky answered. "Me too," said Ricky. "I guess not," Pam said, recalling that Indian girls never became archers. She thought it might not be very polite to try shooting again while in the pueblo. Holly felt the same way, and besides, she did not want the Indians to laugh at her again. "I'll wait till I get home," she said. Redfeather led Pete and Ricky to where several of his friends had gathered with their archery outfits. "Suppose we shoot at a moving target this time," the Indian boy suggested. "Like skeet shooting?" Pete asked. "My dad and I have done that." When Redfeather said the Indians did not know what this meant, Pete told them that skeet shooting is firing shots at flying clay pigeons. "We play that kind of game too," Redfeather said, "only we shoot with bows and arrows, and instead of clay pigeons we use a ball covered with feathers." The Indian boys took turns, showing the Hollisters how they could hit the feathery target. This was not so easy for them as shooting at the stick on the ground, but they did pretty well. When it was Ricky's turn, he missed on the first 6 tries, but sent the arrow into the ball the next time. "Now let's see how you make out," Redfeather said to Pete, handing him a bow and arrow. Redfeather tossed the ball into the air, and Pete's arrow flew straight at it. "A hit!" Ricky shouted. "Anglo boys, good shot," one of the Yumatun boys said admiringly. "I'm just lucky," Pete grinned, and hoped he would hit the next ball. Zing! Plop! He hit it again. Pete was then matched against Redfeather and 2 other Indian boys. The contest was close, but Pete's practice at skeet shooting was in his favor, and he won. "He's a champ!" Ricky cried gleefully, and repeated this to his family and Bluefeather as they walked up. "Good for you," Mr. Hollister praised his son. He said they must leave the pueblo now. Redfeather and Bluefeather walked back to the bus with them, and waved as the Hollisters drove off. "Didn't we have fun?" Sue said enthusiastically. "We sure did," Pete laughed. Then, leaning toward his father, he added, "Dad, take that wrong turn again, will you? I'd like to see whether Mr. Gross came back. If he did, I want to find out what he's doing." "Yes," said Pam. "Rattler might be hiding there." "All right, detectives," their father replied. When he reached the fork, he turned up the bumpy road to the place where Ricky had been nipped by the snake. Mr. Gross's truck was not there. "Let's look around anyway," Pete suggested. "Maybe we'll pick up a clue." "You mean to the turquoise mine?" Ricky asked, as they all scrambled out of the bus. "Let's go in the direction Mr. Gross came from," Pam said, running across the rocks through the low brush. The others followed her. After they had gone some distance, the Hollisters noticed that the ground began to rise. The way was strewn with small boulders, and tall brush slowed their progress. Suddenly Pam, some 50 feet ahead, stopped short. Before her was a breathtaking view. "Hurry, everybody," she called. As Pete, Holly, and Ricky reached her side, Pam pointed to a deep canyon below them. "Don't get too close to the edge," she warned. "It drops right off." "What's that stone tower over there?" Ricky pointed to his left. "Let's see." The four started off with Pam in the lead. But she had gone forward only a few feet when suddenly she screamed and disappeared.